Hey everyone, it's Jody Sutter of the Sutter Company, and welcome back to Just Ask Jody Live, my LinkedIn Live monthly series. And so glad that you're here, and I look forward to sharing with you a conversation that we'll be having on consistency around business development practices at small agencies. And I've got a great guest who I'll be introducing in just a couple of moments, who I think will bring a lot of insights and his own experience to the conversation. Before we get started, though, I did want to let you know about a new program that I'm starting. And before I get to that, just in terms of how it relates to today's topic of consistency, when I think about business development and consistency around business development, how important it is, and why sometimes agency owners fall short of that level of consistency that they really need, I actually think that sometimes it's a proxy for a few other things. Number one, don't have the time. Number two, I don't have the knowledge or the intelligence or the experience to make the right decisions. And number three, sometimes it's just keeping yourself accountable. And so that is one of the reasons. Those are three reasons, really, why I decided to start a mastermind. It's a long time coming. And I'm going to have Megan, my team member, flash a little bit more information. I'm just in the process of putting this together. It's going to be a monthly 90-minute session. In fact, what I may even do is, depending on the interest, is have more than one mastermind group. I mean, playing around with the ideas of potentially having different masterminds around different areas of business development, or for different types of agencies in terms of where they are in their business arc, or what issues they struggle most with around business development. Anyway, but I'm also offering currently an inaugural pricing of $415 a month. The regular price is going to be $495. So that means that for under $5,000 a year, you get access to live monthly coaching around business development. None of the masterminds are going to be more than 6 agencies. So there's going to be plenty of time to bring up the issues that you're struggling with and to learn from others. So if you would like more information, you can email me at jody@thesuttercompany.com, as it says right here. You can also just message me on LinkedIn, since we're all here on LinkedIn, and all my contact information is on my LinkedIn page as well. So I hope that you guys will join me on that. I think it's going to be a really interesting journey for us all. Now, for today's LinkedIn Live, we are talking about consistency around business development at small agencies. And my guest is Chip Griffin. He is the founder of Saga Small Agency Growth Alliance. And I've known Chip for a couple of years, and he and I have a few things in common. But one of the things that we don't have in common, that I think is one of the reasons why Chip is so valuable on our conversation today, is that Chip himself is a former agency CEO. In fact, he's been a former agency CEO several times over. And so he brings a lot of experience and insights that I think are going to be useful for our conversation today. So Chip, welcome to Just Ask Jody Live. And did I miss anything in that sort of very brief intro that you would like to include, so the folks who are joining us today and watching the recording really understand what you bring to our business?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here, Jody. I always enjoy our conversations, and
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to today's. I think you covered it very well. I mean, essentially what I do now is I share the wisdom of my success and the lessons of my failures. And the failures you learn more from. So I talk more about those with my clients these days.
Exactly. And well, I focus solely on business development. You focus on business development along with other things. Really, it's about, pardon me, everyone, I'm getting over a Christmas/New Year's cold. So I hope it doesn't get in the way. But really, you focus on like the optimizing the helping agency owners run an agency where they want to go walk in the door every day, where they're going to be as fulfilled as possible.
Yeah, I basically, sit next to the owner of the agency and whisper in their ear to give them answers. Sometimes I'm more like a therapist and just sit back and listen as they share their concerns and frustrations. But it's really it takes a look at the whole agency and tries to make sure that the owner is getting what they want from the business. Because one of my big well-held philosophies is that if you're going to take on all the stress and risk of owning your own agency, it should be giving you what you want in terms of
Right.
compensation, the type of work, the flexibility of that work, and all of those things.
Right. Absolutely. But you do have to put something into it in order to get that out of it.
Absolutely.
That's a little transition to the conversation today around consistency. And I thought this was, well, first of all, I thought it was a great conversation because I think you and I have had conversations about this when I've appeared on some of your shows. Also, this is the time of year, January. We've just ideally just completed our 2023 plans, and now we're in execution mode. And consistency is a big part of getting your plans done. I think consistency is actually a little bit of a proxy sometimes for, or I think the reason behind a lack of consistency can often be more about uncertainty and maybe even fear. Getting out there and exposing myself as an agency owner in ways that make me feel uncomfortable to win business. What do you think? What do you think is the reason behind why agency owners tend to be inconsistent with their business development activities?
So I think a big reason is because they overcomplicate things and they try to do too many things at once.
Yes.
And because it is January, if you think about it, a lot of folks, in addition to hitting the ground running in terms of their business, they also try to hit the ground running in terms of things like health. And so you start to say, okay, I'm going to have dry January. I'm going to run 10 miles a day. I'm going to spend an hour in the gym and all these things. And
Yeah.
they don't last because you're trying to bite off too much all at once. And so I think with business development, if you really simplify your business development efforts, then it becomes a whole lot easier to be consistent with them.
That's a really great point and something that I see as well. I think that, yes, the inconsistency is often due to the fact that there's so much you're trying to do that how can you possibly be consistent? A lot of times too, I think there might be a certain level of guilt, like, well, I should be doing all these things in order to bring in as much revenue as possible. And most what I find is that for a lot of agency owners who may not be natural business developers, they intellectually know all those things that they should or could be doing, but it doesn't necessarily play to their strengths. And I think when we're trying to do things that don't play to our strengths, we tend to avoid them, and that's also where inconsistency comes in. Then,
Absolutely. You need to play to your strengths, and you also need to do the things that you enjoy. So the
yeah,
way that I do business development may not be the same way you do business development because we've had different levels of success with different tactics. And frankly, we enjoy certain things more than
right,
others. And if you don't enjoy it, it's really hard to be consistent at it. If I say,
yes,
okay, I'm going to, do 100 push-ups every day, I don't enjoy doing push-ups. That's probably not going to be something that, I'm going to stick with. And so you need to try to come up with the things that you will feel good about doing on a regular basis. And part of that comes from looking at your track record. You
yeah,
got to where you are successfully somehow. Look at how you won business in the past. Take
right.
lessons from that and do more of that. And too often we hear, oh, someone's running Facebook ads and generating business. Someone said I should become a speaker and that'll generate business. Focus on what's worked for you first before you
Right.
start going off and trying all sorts of new things.
Yeah, I think consistency also has a lot to do with sort of discipline and systems. And so I think that's a really interesting point because when you can look back and see, well, what have I done? What's worked in the past? Whether I realize that's what was going on or not, how do I apply that now? So I think referrals is, and it applies to this. So um, most small agencies, especially ones that may not have a formal business development operation in place, rely on referrals. And then a lot of referrals, word of mouth. And then a lot of them will say to me, and probably to you too, oh, we over rely on referrals. And while I think that's possible, I actually find that most agencies actually don't over rely on referrals. They may feel like it, but usually what has to happen is they have to go from an informal referral practice to a more formal one. And I think that's where it's really helpful to go back and like, well, wait a minute, what about those referrals worked? How do we then processize it, into a system? Is that something you've seen work for agencies or any other examples of that type of thing, what's worked well and how they can create a process out of it?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, I do have a lot of agencies who will tell me, oh, I know I need to do more than referrals in order to have a big, strong, successful agency. You don't necessarily. Referrals
Right.
are actually the engine for the vast majority of agencies out there. What you need to do is, as you say, come up with a process, come up with a way to make the referrals easier and to increase the frequency with which you get them. And so a lot of that comes down to, I think, two things. One is you need to have a very clear identity for your agency. You need to be able to give your elevator pitch in just a couple of sentences. Your entire team needs to have the same message. And if you share that with people who could refer business to you, you put yourself in a position to have success. Because if
Yeah.
people don't know what you do, they can't refer business to you. So
Yeah.
that's step one, is get yourself really clear on that positioning.
Yeah. I was just writing a quick note because before this broadcast, we were talking about. Well, one of the things I brought up was like where agency owners can apply more consistency, and one of the things I sort of quickly said was around their materials, and you brought up a really valid point, which was, well, I don't like to. So sometimes I like to de-emphasize that. I'm putting words in your mouth, but to de-emphasize that because agencies tend to reinvent the wheel all the time with their materials. But consistency also means, I think, arriving at that positioning or arriving at a set of messages that you're going to communicate through your materials and communicating that consistently
Right.
and not reinventing.
So there certainly is a lot of reinvention of the wheel, and I'll be honest, on creds decks, I think most agencies should just burn them. I guess you can't really burn them since they're mostly digital these days, but whatever the digital equivalent of burning them is, because it too many agencies rely on their creds deck as a crutch, and they should be having meaningful conversations with prospects. And if you have meaningful conversations, you don't need a whole lot of words on the screen and running through all these slides, because that distracts from building the relationship with the prospect, which is how you're actually going to ultimately close the business. So I would argue that credential decks actually slow down the business development process in many cases. Not all, sometimes you need it, I get it, but really use it as a last resort, not your first step. And I think that the reason why agencies focus on creds decks and other documents is because it's soothing. It makes them feel like they're doing something for business development. If I have an hour on my schedule and I say, okay, I'm going to spend an hour for business development, it's a lot easier for me to tinker with my PowerPoint deck than it is for me to actually do some outreach or create some content or any of the other things that you could be doing for business development.
It's like if you decide that you're going to do a prospecting program, you're going to do some outreach. It feels so productive to rework your list or do a little more research than maybe you need to on your prospect, and then you never make the call. I want to go back to creds. So this is digressing a little bit, and I know how I would answer this question, but I'd be curious to hear how you would answer this question, because maybe people are also thinking like, well, if we don't have a creds deck, what if we went through like a little mini buyer's journey, buyer's arc from the moment a prospect says, yeah, you could be interesting, to the moment that they go, yeah, here's a contract, let's work together. The creds gets inserted so frequently. What would you substitute, say, for that initial meeting instead of, what should they use instead of a creds deck?
So they should ask questions and listen.
Yeah.
And we spend too much time talking about ourselves, but really what we need to do is we need to understand what the challenge is that our prospect has and figure out if we're even a good fit.
Yeah.
We start selling ourselves as a fit before we even really know if we are. And so I like to start out any conversation with a prospect saying, so what brings us together today?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a casual, just, conversation starter. It starts out sometimes that way, but then I'll say, no, I mean, really, what specifically caused you to call me up, email me, and schedule today's meeting? Because it's more than just, I need a new website or I need an advertising campaign. Something triggered it. And the more that you can, as the agency, figure out what that is it because the CEO pounded his fist on the desk and said, by God, our website looks awful, we need to change it? Or is it because your sales team came to you and said, we need more leads, we need to figure this out? What is it that's actually brought you together? Because that's how you will figure out if you're a fit, and if so, how to sell yourself.
That's interesting. So let's say you're a digital marketing agency or a website design firm. And your default is to say something like, we build dynamic and beautiful websites for the world's greatest brands. That is probably valid and true and to a certain extent appealing, but it's only appealing once once a client knows that you know about them. So I would say to that agency, well, a better lead, better home screen might be, going back to what you said, like, let's see if I can put some words into their mouths, like something more about transforming brands websites so that they generate leads, or so that you can actually generate sales from your website. Take your static website and turn it into a lead generating machine, right? So when your clients see that, I mean, it's not the best line, so please, no one, everyone out there, don't use it. But when your clients see that, they go, "Wow, that's exactly what my boss is writing me about." And so when they contact you, you are less likely to have to sell yourself and do the dog and pony show and go right to that conversation, because they feel like they already trust you. They feel like you already know them, right? Have you found that?
Yeah, and I think when it comes to how we talk about ourselves as agencies, we make the mistake of using, some of this really fluffy, easy language. Like, we
Mm,
build beautiful websites that convert leads and make sales for you. Okay, cool. Find an agency that doesn't say that.
right.
And so it's not that you have to be truly unique. Nobody's
Yeah.
really looking for a truly unique agency, but you need to have one that's speaking to the specific challenge of your target audience. And so you need to be unafraid of putting a stake in the ground and saying, okay, this is my point of view on this or that. We serve, B2B businesses in the manufacturing sector. We serve startup companies
Yeah.
in the biotech space. Really be clear about who you serve and the problem you solve in such a way that someone feels like you're already talking to them,
Right.
just like you and I do, right?
Yeah.
We could very easily go out there and say we can work for any agency under the sun. We certainly have the knowledge and know-how to advise just about any agency that comes to us.
Yeah.
But what we've done is we've really honed our expertise on small agencies.
Yeah.
And if you're clear about who you serve and how you serve them and what your point of view is, you're much more appealing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Um, what else was I going to ask you? So that was also leading me to another one. Let me just refer to my notes. Um, Consistent. The other thing too, I think about, just going back to consistency. So there's consistency around messaging. There's consistency around prospecting. There's consistency around developing content. This also kind of goes back to do what you're good at, and how your prospecting or your business development operation might look different from mine. So my consistency, the best way for me to generate leads might be going after my list and making those calls every week and nurture, nurture, nurture. And the best way for you to generate those leads is to have a robust content strategy where you're putting out consistent content with a lead generation capture at the end. Um, Tell me a little bit about, where you think, if an agency had to choose only one area of consistency, where do you think they should choose? And is that even a fair question to ask?
I mean, it depends, right?
Yeah.
The way that I end my podcast that I do, the Agency Leadership Podcast with Jenny Dietrich, every episode we end with "it depends," because it really relies upon understanding what has worked for that agency in the past and
Yeah.
what the person is comfortable with, and there are certain things that come easily for folks, right, from a
Mm,
consistency standpoint, and so you may need to work on one area over another in your individual case. I think really the key here is to try to find ways to generate meaningful conversations on a consistent basis. Because none of these things, whether it's direct outreach or creating content or going to events or speaking, unless it's leading to meaningful conversations. And that doesn't have to be a sales conversation. It can be a referral
mm.
conversation.
Right.
It can be a market research conversation of some sort where you're learning about what your prospect, but some kind of meaningful conversation on a regular basis, at least a couple of those a week. That's really what I would strive for. And you just need to figure out how to drive to that. Because if you're having meaningful conversations, it will eventually lead to revenue in almost every case.
Okay, interesting. I think you sort of, again, I was putting, anticipating the question that might be on an agency's mind, which is, well, wait a minute, if I'm not having selling conversations, first of all, why am I doing this? And like, yeah, what are those conversations? How does that lead to an opportunity in the future? And I think what you're saying is really about sort of building those relationships.
Yeah. And first of all, we need to stop calling it sales. because
Okay, well, we might disagree there because I think
I,
I'm not like, let's just call it what it is. It's sales.
but so here's the problem. Most
Yeah,
agency owners, I think, when they hear the word sales,
yeah.
they think about a selling process much like you would sell a car to someone, or where your goal is just to get them to do it. And you
Mhm.
don't really care whether it's the right car for them. You care that it's the car that you're selling.
Yeah.
And I think the agency world is different because it is about relationships. And it's more like matchmaking. You need
Mhm.
to find the right dance partners for your agency, because if you get the wrong one, I mean, I can go out there and help an agency owner sell their services to someone, and you can try to convince someone that they should hire you, but they're going to have buyer's remorse down the road if it's not really a good fit.
True.
And what does that do? That damages your reputation. And frankly, it damages your profitability because now you're trying to service a client who's unhappy because you don't want to write them a refund check. So you got to try to overservice
Right.
them and do things that you wouldn't otherwise do. And don't do it. Find good fits. If you find good fits, and I'm happy to tell someone, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to solve your challenge for you, but I can refer you to someone else, right? Or I can just say, hey, I don't even know who would be a good fit, if
Yeah.
that's the honest answer. Focus on matchmaking. Don't focus on selling at all costs. It's not just about getting the signature on the contract.
I I hear what you're saying. I get that. I do think though that I truly believe that good salespeople or people who understand what good selling is, inherent is in that is making sure that they are providing their client with the best solution, whether it's their solution or someone else's solution, or being willing to walk away if they're not the right solution. I suppose what I, but I do agree with you. I think most agency owners can get a little freaked out by the notion of sales, and so I think we are probably trying to solve the same problem from a slightly different angle. And I'm saying, no, let me show you what a good salesperson, in my opinion, is really about. And you're saying, let's remove this idea. Let's just take that like ickiness of sales out of it, so that it doesn't get in the way. So we get you out there and we get you having those quality conversations and asking those questions and building the relationships.
Yeah, we agree on the substance. It's really the messaging on how you get
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
and I think both can work. It's really just focusing on having those meaningful, substantive conversations, and you don't
Mhm.
need to have a ton of them. I think this is the other reason why people tend to be inconsistent when it comes to business development for agencies, because they think
Yeah.
they need much too large a pipeline and they need far more clients than they really do. Most small
Mhm.
agencies have 10 to 15 clients that they're serving at any given time.
Right.
It's You don't need to be like a software company or like a widget company where you've got hundreds and hundreds of
Right.
prospects in the pipeline
Yeah.
at any given time. Most years you're probably only going to sign what, two, three, four clients if you're having
Yeah.
a great year,
Yeah.
because you're hopefully going to retain a lot of the existing business.
Yeah.
You have to be reasonable. And if you start thinking that I need all of these people in my pipeline, it becomes harder to be consistent because it's such a large target that it's scary.
Yeah, it's funny. One of my clients, a web design firm. I don't know. Maybe some of them are listening today, but they shall remain unnamed for the time being. They just yesterday, I had my weekly status meeting with them, and we talked about a couple of things that apply to this conversation that you and I are having right now. Number one, we talked about potentially purchasing a list to help them get into a category that they do well in, but they haven't brought in business. They haven't done a lot of new business for, right? So they've got experience in, but they haven't been doing a lot of proactive business development for. So buying a list, and for me, I've been helping them try to winnow it down, but still, like 1,000 names for a small agency or 1,000 companies to pitch. That's a lot. Meanwhile, they're also working on organically growing a large healthcare client. They're working with a tiny, a sliver of that company. And I even said to them, like, if you could get two more projects from this one gigantic healthcare company, they're like, oh my God, that would be great. And then I thought, well, why are we looking at a list of 1,000 unknown companies when you could be like just working on those two pieces of business that you could get through organic growth. So yes, there's this idea that, oh no, but we have to have the list. We have to be out there. We have to be out there. We have to be out there, when it may not be the best use of an agency's time.
Well, and the vast majority of agencies shouldn't be out buying lists.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a list, you're watching this on the platform that you should be using to build that list.
Yeah.
Start with your own LinkedIn connections. Look at your second degree connections. If someone's not a first or second degree connection on LinkedIn, wait. Go after them after you've exhausted all of your first and second degree connections.
Yeah.
Come back to me in about 5 years.
Yeah. I know. And yeah, and it's like it's hiding in plain sight.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you about something else, or let's talk about something else that I think is probably the number one reason why I think agency owners feel resistance or fall into the inconsistency trap, and that is time or lack thereof. Well, I guess double-barreled question. How frequently do you hear that? I hesitate to use the word excuse, although I do think it's an excuse. How often do you hear that reason for not pursuing business development consistently, and what do you tend to advise your clients?
Well, that's where it comes down to focusing on doing the things that you enjoy for business development.
Yeah.
Because if you enjoy something, you'll make time for it.
Yeah.
And the reason why we come up with these excuses are because we've put ourselves into a box where what we think we need to do for business development is painful enough that we would rather do something else. Almost any agency owner can find an hour or two a week to do business development. So if you tell me you're doing none,
Yeah.
something's wrong. Now, you may need to spend more than 1 or 2 hours a week, depending on where you're at in your agency life cycle, but start there. Figure out how much time you're spending now and just keep gradually increasing it. Don't say, I need to carve out 20% of my week for business development. If you try to do that, you're going to go bonkers and you won't be consistent because you won't achieve your goal. Do it in small chunks. If you're spending an hour now, spend an hour and a half or 2 hours.
Right.
If you're spending no time, just block out an hour a week, just an hour.
Let me ask you this. This is seriously a question more for me almost than the agency owners that might be listening today. So my theory is that most agency owners could probably delegate more of their time to others or delegate more of the responsibility to others so that they can regain time to do one of their most important jobs, which is business development. But look, I'm completely biased because my focus is 100% on business development. Your focus is on other areas. So I'd love to know how frequently, if at all, do you find agency owners should be delegating tasks that they're currently doing themselves?
100% of the time. Look, the agency owners are miserable at figuring out how to spend their own time, and it's the most valuable resource that they have. You cannot go out and buy more owner time. It is what it is, apart from giving up equity in the business, and who wants to do that just to get more owner time. You need to sit down and you need to write down your own job description. Not what you're doing today, but what you want to be doing and what you think will help you grow the agency.
Yeah.
And once you've done that, now you need to do some accurate time tracking, which you should have been doing anyway because it helps you track profitability. But let's assume that you haven't been doing that consistently. Do it now so you can figure out how your time is actually being spent. If you compare that to the job description you've written, now you can figure out what needs to change, what needs to be delegated, what do you need to stop doing. And your job description and my job description as an agency owner may be different because we like doing different things. And that's okay. But you need to know what you're doing, and then you need to figure out what you need someone else to help you with. Yeah. And once you've done that, then you're in a much better position to maximize the resources of your agency.
I think there's another advantage that approach has as well, is that job description of the future may very well not have a lot of business development in it. And I think that's okay, actually. Mm-hmm. I think business development is always going to be part of the agency owner's primary job. But ideally, that agency owner can say, in 5 years, I want it to be 2% instead of 40%. And so what do you need to do to get there? You need to look forward. You need to look ahead on how do I start to integrate others into this role. But the only way you're going to do that is if you have taken the lead. If you have a way of saying, here's how we do business development at our agency. Here are the tactics that we use, and it's based on our strengths. It's based on our goals. And I think it can be a real mistake when you start to offload business development to others, expecting them, bringing in that new business person and expecting them to set the tone. What's our new business strategy? I think that is the agency owner's question to answer, not a business development person's question to answer.
Yeah, I think it rarely works for a small agency or really any agency to fully delegate the business development task to someone else. You need to have the leadership role. You need to spend time on it.
Yes.
I don't know any agency owner of any size that is not involved in business development. And so you
Yeah.
need to figure out how you're going to lead that. You can absolutely get help, absolutely delegate tasks, absolutely get help, but you're still ultimately responsible for it.
Yeah. I think the other thing too that agency owners maybe or agencies in general don't always do as much as they could is when they look at that help. A lot of the stuff that holds us back too are some of those more administrative activities around business development, and there are a fair amount of them. Let's go even when you're talking about your prospect database, maintaining that database. That can be done by someone else, and whether they may be in-house on your team, it could be a great administrative assistant or coordinator, or it could be a third party. You and I, actually, I don't know if you do this, but I think you and I, as solopreneurs or owners of 2 to 3 person companies, we got used to doing things like going out and hiring virtual assistants, and so that's often a strategy or a tactic that I'll recommend for my clients. Is like, don't use the fact that you don't have time to update your CRM database as a reason not to prospect. Hire someone for a reasonable amount of money to help you do that admin stuff that's getting you stuck.
Yeah. Also, though, I will say that agency owners way overestimate the amount of admin work that they're doing. I talk to a lot who are like, well, I could free up half my week if I had a VA to do admin work. You can't. We just think of admin work as so painful that we overestimate how much of our schedule it actually takes. And that's why we need to do accurate time tracking, because that illuminates it. I mean, we're way past the days when
Yeah.
I first got started in the agency world where we still had typewriters and photocopy machines and fax machines, and there was a lot of administrative time that someone else could do. Now, we just don't need that much. And so if we're doing that much, then we need to ask, is it actually essential?
Yeah.
And if it is, then can we delegate it to someone? But probably not half or full time, probably much less than that for the pure admin portion of our day.
Yeah. Look, we're at a little past, I think a little past half past the hour. And, these conversations always go so much faster than I think they're going to. But I think just to wrap things up, we talked about being, consistency being helped by clarity around your positioning, embracing the activities that you are good at and how business development for you is going to look different from business development from me. There's lots of ways to bring in leads and make sure that you're doing something that adheres to your strengths so that you do it more consistently. I think in some ways we sort of talked around about this, but maybe starting small, better to do that 1 hour a week and get used to that and expand that from there. And then don't overestimate the amount of time it's going to take to get something meaningful done.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
If people just follow that advice, they're all set.
Anything else that you would say, if you were, well, let me ask you, what do you do consistently for your own business development?
So my main focus for business development is content creation, whether that's podcasts, articles, that sort of thing. Yep. And the other step I guess we didn't really talk about was what do all these things lead to, whether it's outreach or content or speaking. And for me, it leads to a free consultation. My point of view is I'm happy to spend 30 minutes on the phone with any agency owner talking about whatever they want. So it's not a sales call. It's literally, if you want to bring a list of questions, I'll give it to you. And I'm not afraid about giving away that service, because for me, it's market research. I start to learn more about the challenges that agency owners have. So even if they don't convert to a client, I've still gotten value out of it myself that's worth that 30 minutes of my time. And so think about what your step is. It may not be a free consultation. It may be something else, but what are you trying to move people to as that intermediate step before they become a client?
That's so interesting. And first of all, so you've heard it here, folks. Take advantage of Chip's free consultation, because you're going to learn a lot. But I think that the other thing that you're saying there is super interesting, that all this consistency and activity will be meaningless if you're not asking for the sale. Like if you're not asking for the contact information on a lead generating form, or you're not asking for the meeting, or you're not asking for the opportunity to bid on a project. And that's something, sometimes I think agency owners are a little too polite. that's the right word too.
Well,
So
but you can be because it can be giving value. It could be that free consultation. You give away a lot of material
yeah,
for folks and create a lot of videos and that sort of thing. And so if you're doing that, that can be that intermediate step, right? I just want people to engage. I want people to engage with your agency so that they start to get to know you better, start building that relationship and figure out if there's a good fit.
yeah. Chip, this was so fun. I knew this would be a good conversation. I enjoyed it. I hope everyone else did too. And thank you for the folks who were participating, and saw a couple of familiar names. And this will, of course, be available on the Sutter Company LinkedIn page. Chip, have a great 2023. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot. I look forward to appearing on one of your shows again soon. Yeah. By the way, Chip also has a couple of really great podcasts and streaming shows. So check him out. Check his LinkedIn profile out.